So today should be very interesting and also a little bit controversial because the topic we're tackling is three dirty little secrets credit card processors don't want their salespeople to know about. Okay, so let's dive right in. Tell me about secret number one.
Okay, well, this is a big one, secret number one, and that is a merchant-level salespeople are actually set up to fail from day one on purpose by many, if not most, credit card processing organizations.
Hmm, that seems counterproductive, so I have to ask, why would a credit card processor implement a business model for their salespeople to fail? What's the point of this?
So number one is they can take 100% of the agent's residuals. And, it's hard to believe, but an ISO's independent sales organization's hidden objective really don't include the success of salespeople. And what their objective is to get as many merchant accounts as they can. And salespeople are usually an expendable commodity that is discarded after a few deals are done. That way the company can keep the residual after the sales agent leaves. So it's a win-win because the company spent almost no money to get the individual agent to go to work for them. Second would be is just look at the facts. And, millions and millions are spent on recruiting by the companies, but really just pennies are spent on training. And, one company that Trevor and I were talking with the other day hires between 500 and 600 individual agents every single week with really an objective to get just a few of them to become successful. And, that's what most people in this industry don't know or don't understand that. So we wanted to make that number one.
Well, and then I think I would add to that is another objective of a lot of different ISOs in credit card processing organizations is not to start a business and keep and retain and build that business for 20, 30, 40 years. This industry is really very different and very aggressive from an acquiring standpoint. So, in fact, a lot of ISOs and credit card processing companies start with the objective to build an ISO for 4 or 5 years and then sell it off because they know there are acquirers out there that are so aggressive to acquire their portfolio that they can get a decent multiple by selling it, whether it's 25, 30, 40 times whatever their monthly residual is worth. And if they have a bunch of agents out there who are retaining a percentage of that residual, then that takes away from their revenue at the end of their 5-year plan. So, again, most people plan to be acquired. If they are able to get a couple of agents to produce 1 or 2 deals and then they retain that full residual, then they can sell that to an acquirer for much more than if the agent was still an active agent with getting residual because they were still producing.
I see. So how do salespeople know if they're a victim of this model?
Well, there's a few things that you can look for, and one of them's pretty obvious if you worked out of this industry and then are now coming into this industry, especially in a sales capacity. So usually most credit card processing companies that you go to work for usually have some sort of sales director or sales manager, whatever it is that they call that person that you work with one-on-one. And if it's incredibly tough to get a hold of that person on the phone, you're probably a victim of that model because that person is really very important to your success. Also, if you're having a hard time getting any just general type of sales and marketing advice, or if it's just tough to close a deal, and if you feel like you're by yourself a lot of the time, then you're probably a victim of that type of a model. Because you're probably just not a priority. And like Clark talked about earlier, you look at the facts, the numbers, there's pennies spent on training and support for agents, but millions and millions spent on recruiting. So you'll be able to tell if you feel like your efforts are being funded by pennies rather than by millions and millions of dollars. That's usually the case, unfortunately. Other than that, if your training program when you very first came on with your ISO consisted of 1 day of PowerPoint presentations, a call from your sales director, and then some flyers sent to you in the mail, and that's it, you're probably a victim of the typical ISO model, which is, again, recruit as many as they possibly can with the hopes that you'll turn in 1 or 2 deals, and then you forfeit 100% of your residual.
And I agree. And, for it to make sense, there has to be a well thought out and proven training program. And we always talk about, you got to train agents on how to get a lead, how to set up an appointment once you have a lead, how to collect a statement. And after you get a statement, then you have to go in and present a proposal. How do you do that? And how do you make the sale? How do you close the sale? And then just do the install. So after you've sold them and part of the program that we work with is, how do you install the equipment and then retain the account and get referrals from there. So I said earlier, it's got to be duplicatable. It's got to be ultra specific. And most important, it's got to be simplistic.
Well, what should salespeople listening to this do to avoid being set up to fail? What do you recommend here?
First of all, you have to be aware of the nature of the industry so that you know what to look for. Trevor and I have contracts with 12 or 13 different companies that we've brought off and on over the years just to try to find the right company that works. And I think we have, 1.5 that actually work and do the things that we want them to do. And then I would say second is that you got to get the right contract in place so that at some point, your residual is vested. And we don't mind vesting; that's okay. But what we don't like is companies that do a multiple of things to try to get your residual from you. And for example, if they require you to sell one merchant account every single month in order to maintain your residual, then that's just not right. And you could build a $20,000 a month residual and then get in a car accident and break your leg and you don't work for a month, and you would lose your entire residual. So you got to you got to make sure that you've got the right contract in place.
Well, and I think in addition to the right contract and the right company, if you're going to go to work for a company that doesn't invest in training you, again, they're spending pennies for a few PowerPoint presentations they stick on their back-end portal, expect you to go through, read them, and become a phenomenal salesman. That's just not realistic. So you have to be the one to really invest in yourself in really high-quality training. And, the type of training that's proven, field-proven, to actually get the results that you're looking for. It's not the newest fad or the next shiny object. It needs to be something in sales and marketing. I mean, you need to know how to be able to acquire leads, and you need to know how to sell deals. And if you're having a hard time converting prospects to customers, then invest in a sales program that'll teach you exactly how to do that. Or if you're having a hard time, being able to generate enough leads so you can get enough appointments to fund your entire sales funnel so you can build the residual and actually make it in the business, then buy a book or a course and actually invest in yourself. So you don't rely, the bottom line is you can't rely on an organization who their main objective is to have you turn in one or two deals and then have you eventually phase out so they can assume your residual, because that's not in your best interest. It's just not going to work out. I mean, the numbers prove that. So don't be afraid to invest in yourself.
Interesting. Okay. I hope everyone's taking notes here. Let's unveil the second dirty little secret.
Usually that main point of contact you have at your ISO is in reality never sold a merchant account face-to-face in their entire life. And it's a case of the blind leading the blind. But even worse, usually those who are running and creating the training programs, even for the specific merchant level salespeople, have actually never sold merchant accounts in their life as well. So not only has your sales director never sold a merchant account face-to-face, and if they have, it's been one or two deals, that were given to them, spoon-fed to them from a family member or a friend, and then they decided to take a job at an ISO and be a sales director because they didn't like going door to door. But that's the cold, harsh reality, is that it's the blind leading the blind. Usually you can't really trust or rely on a specific sales director who doesn't have any experience to tell you what to do, because they just don't know how to do it because they've never done it themselves.
So maybe this goes back to the last point you just made, but can you help me understand and our listeners understand Why would a million or even billion-dollar company have managers advising their salespeople and creating their training programs if they've never actually done it themselves?
Yeah, it really does go back to the point we just made in the very first secret, that an ISO's real objective is not to help you, go take a 20 or 30 year career and build a huge merchant account portfolio with them, because if that was the case, they would be funding that type of a model. And if you've been with ISOs to where it's just you feel like you had one day of training, if that, in a conference call every once in a while, that's not the case. So it's an ISO's real objective is to acquire as many agents as they can, as fast as they can, have them produce a couple of deals, and then assume 100% of that agent's portfolio. So when they go to be acquired, they can sell it for a higher multiple and get more profitability from their portfolio. And then the other point is that there's so many different sales directors and managers and so-called experts in all these ISOs all across the country. But the reality is that there is a total lack of qualified candidate for that position. When you think about what that position is, a sales director or a sales manager, you would think or expect it to be somebody who has actually done it before, with levels of, a certain level of success, you would assume. The problem with that is because all these ISOs all over the country have the exact same model, which we've kind of beaten to death here, there are very few people who actually make it. I think we just barely were talking with an ISO that we place a majority of our business with, about Clark in particular, and his numbers were no joke. Clark, what he was able to do in his first year, he was 1 in 10,000. And that's an actual real statistic. 1 in 10,000 about people who were able to do what he did. And so if you think about, Clark would be a perfect candidate for a sales director, but he would never take the job because he can get paid so much more as a merchant level salesperson, do what he's doing. But there's not very many of him or me out there to be able to take these type of jobs, and they don't pay those people enough. So a lot of it's just blind leading the blind, just kind of appeasing salespeople with theory and not real proven technique that they've actually done themselves.
Yeah, Trev, and at the end of the day, we were talking with one of our sales directors with one of the companies that we work with the other day, and he hadn't sold in over 20 years. And so the thing about that is that, this industry changes on a weekly basis, it seems like, or a monthly basis. But if you haven't actually been down the street in 20 years, then it would be difficult to relate to someone else. But I think that's right, Trev. And at the end of the day, it's just not a priority. And the reason it's not is because what they do works for them. And again, we were talking again with a $5 billion company the other day, and the person that heads up their entire sales force and training has never been in the field. And we just kind of, after Trevor and I met with him, we just kind of laughed it off after, because it's like, how do you build a training program for agents across the country if you've actually never done it before? And then I think the other thing is, I think most companies and many companies just copy what everybody else does, and it seems to, the attitude is good enough is good enough because it does work for companies, and they're profitable doing this. And as Trevor said earlier, the objective is for many companies is just to get big and be sold. And so it's interesting how it works.
So what's the solution here? What do salespeople need to do? Or where should they go in order to get actual help that'll bring them results, that'll help them sell more merchant accounts, that'll help them build their residual?
Again, I think we mentioned this earlier, but it's an important point, and you got to follow someone who's actually done it. And I think I'm probably a perfect example. I mean, I was hired. My background is insurance. I spent 17 years in the insurance industry as an executive for most of that time, and I was hired direct as a vice president of a very large merchant level processing company, and I didn't know how to sell this. I knew how to sell in general and train people how to sell. But I didn't know anything about merchant processing, and yet they hired me as a as their vice president. And so that's one of the reasons that I ended up leaving that position and going down the street and building a residual income of over $18,000 myself, just so I could say that I've done it, and just so that when I was talking to other people, it wasn't like it was a big lie. It wasn't like it wasn't real. And I think that's one of the best things that Trevor and I have done together is that, we've both done it.
All right, I think we're ready for dirty little secret number 3 that credit card processors don't want their salespeople to know about.
We kind of like to use the analogy of a wolf in sheep's clothing to kind of explain the strategy. But basically, processors or ISOs like to draw agents in to sell for them with a few different techniques. First thing is they'll offer free terminals or POS systems or technology or whatever. And then the other thing is usually higher and higher but very unrealistic residual splits and Schedule A's. But again, it's based upon our experience. It's kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing type of a technique in our minds.
Why do you say like a wolf in sheep's clothing? Could you expand a little on that?
Yeah, sure. So another way to think about it, just to shed a little bit of light on this, is I remember when I was a kid, and I think all kids, maybe not girls, but I think boys go through this. But I remember being in kindergarten and just playing this one-up game where one kid conversationally ones up the other, and then the other comes back with something more extreme, and then the other one comes back with something just ridiculously extreme. But usually it started out like this. I remember it was my dad could beat up your dad. And then the next kid will say, well, my dad does karate. Well, my dad has a gun. And then the other kid, well, my dad has a rifle. And then inevitably it would always end up to my dad has a bazooka is what it would be. And it's just so ridiculous and so extreme that it's not true. But like we compare this a little bit to the credit card processing industry, and especially if you look at a few of the popular trade magazines, you'll see someone in there, we offer a free terminal, a free VX520 terminal that agent can give out. And then you'll see the next ad. You flip over the page. Well, we offer a free POS system that you can give to anybody. And then you'll see somebody else. Well, we offer a 75% contract, or we offer a 50, a 60, 70, and it just continues to go up until you see somebody. We offer a 95% contract, and every piece of equipment is free, and there's no contract, and it's so ridiculous that. I mean, even a moron looks at that and thinks that's just way too good to be true. And that's why we say kind of like in a wolf in sheep's clothing, the offer that ISOs give an agent and merchants become so ridiculous, that it's impossible to fulfill their promise. So they have to get very creative on the back end, and especially in their pricing with bin fees and different ways to be able to make up for what you think you're getting. And, then you start selling accounts and your residual is not what you think it's going to be. And it's because they're taking it out of the back end with bin fees and other different types of ways to make money because they're trying to give you everything up front. It's just, it becomes laughable really when you sit back and can actually have the clarity to kind of see what's going on. But again, the end result is always an agent offer that's not really what's advertised. There's just no way an ISO can keep their promise at a 95% residual split and giving everything away for free.
But how does a salesperson know if they're selling for a wolf?
Well, this goes back to a little bit of what Trevor was just talking about. And again, you're promised the world up front, and it seems too good to be true. And I remember one of the first companies that I signed up with offered me a 90% contract. And I know that I don't remember what I actually got, but it was like somewhere between 12 and 13%. And I never could figure out how that was possible, but they had a simple explanation in their mind for that. So again, it's just it's just too good to be true. And then the second one I would give you, residual in your bonus reporting is just undetailed. and it's non-transparent. And I've been involved with companies where one of the companies I worked with, as a vice president, I couldn't understand the commission statement, and I know that our agents couldn't as well. So again, I think it's just very undetailed, and it's hard to get caught in doing the wrong thing. And then the last one I would give you is that your contract has unreasonable production requirements in order to maintain your residual. And I talked about this earlier, but you know what? There's so many companies now are doing this to where it's like if you don't produce at least one deal every single month or at least one deal every quarter, then you lose your residual. Now that language is buried in the 35-page contract, so that it's designed for you never to see that, and it's never discussed with your regional director when you're getting signed up. So I think that you gotta recognize that we love this industry. It's a great industry, but you gotta know what to look for, and you gotta deal with professionals, and hopefully that's why you're listening to this today, so that you can get past this.
Well, and then I think something I would add to this point, and it goes a little bit back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, but there are some companies that will actually attempt to try and give you the residual split that they talked about in order to compete with other ISOs. They feel like they have to give these big residual splits, and there are some who want to be very, very honest and upfront, and they try to give you as much as they possibly can to honor the agreement they made with you. But here's the problem when that happens. They literally can't afford support people. They literally can't afford to send you marketing materials or have people on the phone, and their customer service is horrible because they're paying you so much, or other agents so much, that even if you get accounts, the chances of you retaining that account, because the ISO is just not equipped to handle a merchant and retain them because their service is so bad, it really makes no good. It's like making a $100 bill that instantly is transported to a shredder. It does you no good to stick a merchant with a company like that, because at some point they will get screwed, or they will get ripped off, or they will just have such a bad experience that even if they like you, the pain of staying with that company is too much, and they will leave you. And so as an agent, it's easy to get sucked into that 85, 95% residual threshold and think that you can make so much more money by doing that. But it's, in our experience, we've found that there is a cost to doing business, and an ISO has realistic costs, and so we would rather retain a merchant account for life, even if we have to take a little bit of a lesser split, a 60 or 70% split. We love, because we realize that an ISO needs to be able to have enough money coming in to be able to pay for their tech support and salespeople and their reporting and back end and just ease of doing business. And so we don't mind taking a lesser split, so an ISO can actually provide good service to both you, the agent, and then your merchants that you actually stick